Three, two, one. All right, man. I'm here with Tyler Dos Santos-Tam. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for quite a few years now. Man, shit, like what? Since I think 2015
Yeah,
with
maybe
the
before that.
with the Oahu County Democratic Committee and whatnot. But I want to pass it off to you. I'm gonna let you give a little intro about yourself, your background, your experience, and so go ahead and tell the people.
Cool. Well, thanks, James. Again, I'm Tyler Dos Santos-Tam, born and raised here in Honolulu, Hawaii. I wear many hats in the community, and maybe that's a good place to begin. I'm the chair of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. I'm also the honorary consul of Portugal here in Hawaii, so I'm the representative of the Portuguese government here in the islands. I'm the former chair of the Neighborhood Commission, which oversees the island's 33 or so neighborhood boards. And then in my spare time, to pay the bills, I have my own business consulting practice.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and so I really like the Portuguese. What
Yeah.
is your title?
I'm the honorary consul of
The
Portugal.
honorary consul. How'd you stumble into that one?
So the previous honorary consul, Dr. John Henry Felix, had been
Oh,
serving
that's
for 45 years. In fact, I think he probably is or was at the time the longest serving consul in any consular post in the world. And according to the Portuguese government, you're supposed to retire at 75, and they kept him on. I mean, he was so beloved, and they kept him on until he was 90. But the consul general in San Francisco said, well, we probably should go find somebody new. It was 15 years past when he was supposed to retire, but they kept him on. And so she came out to Hawaii, and their criteria was they wanted somebody who could speak Portuguese, somebody who was young, and somebody who was involved in the community. So she met with a number of the community groups, all the kind of elders, the kupuna, if you will, and they recommended that I step into this role. So I interviewed with her. I had a nice lunch, and she said, all right, well, I feel comfortable with this. And thus I was appointed in early 2019.
Oh, that's awesome. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, who else would have fit that criteria?
Yeah.
I feel. I don't know.
That's a good question. I have no idea. But I majored in Portuguese. That was my second major in college, and so it's finally paid off.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting. Yeah, because you're the only other person I know that has any like knowledge of Portuguese language.
Yeah.
So that's like wow. It was made for you almost.
I
That's
guess
perfect.
so.
I like that. That's cool. And then so what is your role? Like what do you do exactly?
So in this role, I am the representative of the Portuguese government here. So if there's ever a Portuguese citizen who's gets involved in some issue here, loses their passport, gets arrested, gets stranded, or just something happens, I'm supposed to basically just help them and advocate for them until more help arrives.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have a large Portuguese community here in Hawaii, and there's a lot of folks here who travel back to Portugal. Maybe they have a distant relative who passed away and they need help with their inheritance, or they have a business interest there or have property. And so I help them with all of these processes. And of course, people are interested in citizenship and visas, so I help them with those forms and the paperwork as well.
Oh wow! See, I didn't even know that. I'm just learning that now.
Yeah.
I knew you were involved with, or did you start the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce?
So I'm the
or-
president of the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce as well. I should have put that in the intro
Yeah.
as well. So yet another hat. And that group's been around since 1979. And when I became the president of that group, I said, we should probably bring in some new energy and new blood. So half of our board members are under 35. So we're really trying to
Wow.
reinvigorate and re-energize that group. But there's 44 countries that have consular representation here. If you drive up Pali Highway, you probably see all the big ones, the Filipino consulate and the Korean and Japanese one on Nu'uanu. But there's a whole bunch of other countries represented here since we are the crossroads of the Pacific.
So where's the Portuguese consulate?
We are sitting in the Portuguese consulate right now,
Yes.
which is my apartment.
It's
For
beautiful.
the time being.
So I'm assuming you don't have a staff.
I know it's just me.
You gotta hire some teleworkers.
I guess so. Yeah.
And then the Portuguese Chamber. When did you become president of that? Did those kind of coincide, or you took that
No, those
role
were actually
because?
kind of separate, but kind of at the same time. I mean, I think the community, which has been around since the first immigrants arrived in 1878. I mean, it's passed through many generations, and I think we're kind of at an inflection point. But as president of the Portuguese Chamber, we try to promote, our Portuguese businesses here, of course, foster a love for the country and the language and the history and everything else. So we have had wine tasting events. We had an author, a children's book author from Portugal, who's really into surfing. Obviously, there's a big surf culture there. If you've ever seen those pictures of those waves at Nazaré, those giant waves. So she came to Hawaii, and we did a book reading at the Kahuku Public Library out on the North Shore, where there's a lot of surfers and surfers' kids, and we bought some books to donate to the library in both English and Portuguese. Actually, as we sit here in my apartment, the listeners can't see this, but there is a box. There's a whole crate of Portuguese sardines.
Is that what those are?
That's what that is.
I thought you were doomsday prepping.
No, I'm not doomsday prepping. I'm not like bulking with tons of sardines as protein or whatever. But there's a company that sent me a crate of canned sardines because they want to expand their market.
Smart.
And it's fantastic. I mean, I'm nothing against the supermarket, canned tuna that you find here, but this is just fantastic.
That's awesome. And then, so what are you going to do with it?
So I need to go make some appointments with some of the local distributors here and just give them samples and connect them with the distributor. So you've caught me with a little bit of late homework because they sent that to me a little while ago, and I got to go to our fields and Fujioka's and Tamura's and everywhere else that kind of serves fine food. And try to sell that. So if you're listening, if anyone out there is listening and interested in a crate of Portuguese sardines and tuna, let me know.
Hey, I'll tell you what, it's got some really good design on there, though. It's like very vibrant colors. Yeah. That's what I love. And I think that's where we connect kind of on a level too, because I used to live in Brazil.
That's right. I did too.
So when I found out you spoke Portuguese, now obviously I feel like your Portuguese, because you studied it, is a lot better than mine, because mine's just conversational. I just learned it while I was there. But then there's that difference of the dialect.
Yeah.
Because Portuguese...
that's the best way to learn, right? It's just to immerse yourself and figure things out. And actually, when I lived in Brazil, because, the culture is a lot more just... how would you say? It's a lot more flexible, and everybody's kind of more hang loose, right? And they have in Brazil, there's this sort of great tradition of slang and inventing sort of new words all the time. And so I'd be talking to people, and because I studied Portuguese, and I felt like I sounded like a dictionary all the time. Hello, this is blah 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 blah. And people there would just have all these great slang words that I would just have to learn and write down, and okay, this is what that is.
And that's how it is, right? Because we always learn the formal language in school, and then when you go out into the street, it's you're like, hello, how are you, sir?
That's
nice
right.
to meet you. And they're like, yo, what's up, bro?
Exactly. And the same thing happens, I'm sure, in English, right?
Yeah, of course.
Especially here in Hawaii with pidgin and everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a Japanese tourist and you've learned in school very proper English, and you roll up here and you have no idea what a lot of people might be saying, but if you stay long enough, you'll quickly learn.
I remember when I first got here, I kept hearing, it seems like cliche now because I've been here for so long, but decline. And then I quickly figured out that back home where I'm from, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we just say whatchamacallit, and that could be anything. So decline is anything. I like that. And then, so you just got back from Portugal.
I did.
What was that like?
So I was there for a week, and we are trying to set up a sister state relationship between Hawaii and Madeira. Madeira is an island in the Atlantic. It's about 90 minutes by plane from mainland Portugal. If you know where the Canary Islands are, which belong to Spain, it's kind of near the Canaries off of Morocco. And about half of the Portuguese immigrants who came to Hawaii came from Madeira. And so there's sort of a historical connection, but for some reason we never got around to making a sister state relationship. And so I was kind of there to meet with people. I had just every day just was packed with meetings with the mayor of the capital and the regional parliament and basically everyone else who would have some stake in a sister state relationship. The chancellor of the university there for student exchanges, just to kind of set up that relationship. So we're hoping that next year we can get it through. The legislature here in Hawaii would have to approve that. But I think it would be really neat for historical reasons. That's where the ukulele, the progenitor of the ukulele, came from.
Really?
The original stringed instrument.
Ah.
And so that's what we're trying to do. That's why I was there. And of course, my family is my great grandfather was born there. My great great grandfather and his wife, emigrated to Hawaii. And so it was also a little bit of a personal thing. And that's kind of neat, right? Getting to know
Yeah,
your
for
roots.
sure.
And especially in a place like Hawaii where people are so proud of their family and where they came from. That was really neat.
Huh. So, yeah, that's very interesting. So who kind of spearheaded that one? Was that something that you...
Yeah, this is me. I mean, we've been trying for years. And in the late 1970s, Hawaii created a sister state relationship with another province of Portugal, another region. But never got around to doing Madeira. And so for years, there had been different attempts, and I think we can get the ball over the finish line.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Like, so what was it like when you went over there? Because I'm sure that some of them understand the history of them migrating to Hawaii.
It was really neat. I mean, there's some people who are very familiar with this, but to them, Hawaii is a very, very far away place, right? And unlike a lot of other destinations, the Portuguese that came to Hawaii came over 100 years ago. And so they, because of the physical distance as well as the difference in time, a lot of those direct relationships have been lost. So we're trying to rekindle that.
Oh, that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And then, of course, there are volcanic islands, too. So if you go, I mean, it looks very much like Hawaii, just with more of that kind of Spanish Mediterranean red tile roof.
And that's why when I looked over at your crate, and then you said it was from Portugal, these Portuguese sardines. Yeah. It reminded me of the buildings in Brazil, how they're painted.
Right.
And then, of course, because it's Portuguese influence and everything too, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And I like your effort that you're trying to connect more of the roots of people from, where they came from originally and settled in Hawaii. And kind of, I guess, I don't know if it's reclaiming or claiming that trait.
Yeah.
Because I just did a podcast with Senator Wakai, and he's been pushing an effort to have Hawaii kind of, grab the sport of surfing, and kind of say, hey, this is ours. We should claim it. Because you have other areas like Australia, like Brazil, other parts around the world, California. Some high schools, he was saying, which I didn't know, I guess on the mainland, they have surfing in high school. So it seems like there's an awakening within maybe the younger people. We're still young, right?
Yeah, we're definitely still young.
Trying to say, hey, I want to find, I want to dig into the roots. I want to reconnect everything. I like that.
I think it's all about knowing your place in the world and like where you come from, because I think that helps you understand why you're here. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I did 23andMe.
Ah, there we go. What did that show?
Well, I'm mostly Irish, French, Slovakian, so many other things. There is some like Portuguese in there. It's a very small amount. It's like 0.03% or something. But I'm more fascinated in the travels of my family throughout the generations. Right. And it shows you on the map of like where everyone... It's not like Ancestry.com. Have you ever done that?
Mm-mm.
Ancestry.com is cool because it's actually a paper trail.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I was able to trace my grandmothers on my mother's side. They came to the U.S. in like 1882. And then my great-grandfather fought in like World War I and things like that. And you look at the census and you can see all the people who lived in the house. They had like 12 people living in the house. I was like, oh, my God. So it's interesting. I don't know anything about my dad's side, really, though.
Well, now's a great time to start. There's lots of resources out there. So
I
do some digging.
It's definitely something I want to try. But what's interesting about 23andMe. Did you do that one or none?
My grandpa did that.
Oh,
I figured
really?
Since I obviously know.
Yeah. That's true.
It's the same set of family.
But the thing about that one though is it'll show you everyone else who took it that you're connected to. Show you their name. And then there's an option if you can connect with them or if you're open to allowing them to message you. But it's always like, I got like 300 fourth distant cousins and whatever. Like, it's interesting. I kind of wish more people would take it so I could see really who's like my first, second, third cousin, where they're at. they gonna leave me in their will? Are they famous? Something like that, right?
That's right. Well, apparently, according to my spam folder, I've got like, relatives in Nigeria and
Yeah. Hey.
wherever else.
I'm still waiting for that check in the mail.
That's right.
I like that. So that's cool, man. I'm actually surprised. I didn't know all that about the consulate gig and that all the things that you were actually go. I knew you went to Portugal, but I didn't know why.
It was
really
an official trip, although my Instagram, would probably tell a different story. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's all kinds of cool, neat things that I was able to do in the few hours a day that I had to
Yeah.
myself. But the rest of the time was just meetings, and we're hoping within the next few months to start getting our application in. Has to go to DBED here at the state level, and then of course the legislature. So we're moving on this, so it'll be exciting.
DBED. What does it have to do there, if you don't mind?
So DBED is the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. So it's sort of the state's catch-all department for
I see.
anything economic development, international relations, tourism. So the sister state effort falls underneath that.
Oh, I see. I see. And is that something that you had to approach the governor?
So it goes through the department. It'll go to the legislature, and of course the governor will have to sign it.
Oh,
So there's
I
lots
see,
of
I
moving
see.
parts,
Yeah,
just like
okay.
everything else.
Because I think the only thing I've ever seen was like sister cities.
So yeah, it's the same thing basically, but on the sister city level, it goes to city council, and I think there's an office within the mayor's office that handles all of this.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's cool, man. See, you're very humble because you never post nothing about none of this. And I feel like you should give yourself credit more because that's a really cool experience.
Oh, well, thank you.
I hope at least somebody was taking some action shots of you.
Oh,
in
there are
meetings or
lots
something.
of action shots over. They did a good job over there of. I did a TV interview for I guess the national TV station, and
In
it was the
Portuguese or
newspaper.
English?
In Portuguese.
What?
And it was on the first morning I arrived, and just like the camera crew is there, and they're like, "We're gonna do an interview," and I'm like, my brain is foggy, but it apparently sounded okay. It was okay enough that they didn't require subtitles, so
Wow.
I felt okay.
Look at you, bro. You're local there
Yeah,
too now.
right.
Is that something that you can find on YouTube? Now I'm gonna have to dig.
Yeah, right. I'll put it on my Instagram at some point.
Yeah. No, you won't.
Actually, no, it's going to go on the sister state website because we're going to try to get people to, sign letters of support and all of that. So it will be on there. It will be
You
online.
better have some good photos on there, man.
There are some good photos.
Is that website up yet, or is there a Facebook page
it
yet?
is, that was on my to-do list this weekend, so I will get around to it.
I feel like I should stop suggesting things because
I know
just
the
adding to
to-do
your
list
to-do
just gets
list.
longer and longer, but that's how it is, right? Especially having so many hats in the community, and managing all of that. But it's just a great way to use, I guess, all the things that I'm interested in, all of my passions,
Yep.
and just help people. That's really what it comes down to.
No, I agree, and that's why it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of times it's kind of like you just wish you had an extra hour to just chill.
Oh, absolutely.
But life is so short. You just got to try to do as much,
Yeah.
I think, good and as much things that will bring, happiness to yourself and positivity. Because that's why I'm not one to. I don't really watch TV and whatnot because I figure if I'm sitting in front of the TV for an hour, I could at least be out. Even if I'm with like my Lions Club members doing something, some sort of charity work or whatever. Like I don't just. But then again, I'm more like an extrovert. Yeah, so I like to be out and about.
And one thing that I've been doing lately is taking one afternoon off every week. Just because, I end up doing a lot of stuff on the weekend. So sometimes, my Saturday or Sunday is totally shot. But I have a little bit of control, I guess, over the weekday. And, no Zoom meetings on whatever afternoon. It's usually a Thursday. And I'll just go do something for myself.
Yeah, no, that's
whether
awesome.
it's going to the beach or have you been to the zoo lately? The zoo is like really neat.
Yeah.
And I feel like us local people like never would go there because it's in Waikiki, and but it's really neat. And you can spend a whole afternoon and look at the animals. And before COVID they would have like programs, and
Yeah.
they would feed the sloths or whatever, and you'd like watch them do that.
Because I just got the what is it, the year pass, and I've been going a couple times just because, like you're saying, like I've never gone until like a couple months ago, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And I have mixed feelings about zoos in general.
Right, yeah.
But it's cool to just see like the elephants and things like that, and it's really weird because the zoo is in like the middle of like Waikiki, but when you're in the zoo, it's like it's calm, quiet. I did not realize how big the zoo was.
Yeah.
I was like, where is all of this when you're outside of the zoo? Like, I don't know. But
And with Hawaii's climate, like it feels, the Africa section, like kind of feels like
Yeah.
Africa. Like, you could feel like you're, close your eyes and imagine yourself there. Or in kind of the rainforest part with all the birds, like you kind of feel like it feels like rainforest. So, yeah, it's a really special place. And same with like, so you live in Chinatown. I mean, you're probably right next to Foster Garden. I mean, that's another sort of little oasis. We have all these little like gems, in our city, right? That people should appreciate more. And I think, well, I hope that the pandemic's made people realize like there actually is some cool stuff here that you can go explore.
For me, it did, for sure. Especially like, again, like the botanical gardens and things. I started going there before COVID, never really did, but it's like we do have so many of these little hidden gems, like you said. And honestly, like a lot of these aren't even overrun by tourists yet.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a piece. Because if you try to go on a hike nowadays, it's like you have to wait in line and
Right.
trying to get up a trail is like, oh, cringe. But
So if there's any tourists listening, the zoo sucks, the garden sucks.
Yeah.
Don't go. Don't even bother.
yeah, they're really expensive. But
No, they're great. They're great. You should go.
Yeah, it's just hard because the trails just packed with people. But everyone's trying to escape COVID.
Yeah.
Which brings me into you became chair of the Democratic
Yeah.
Party of Hawaii during COVID, which we had talked about before, but I wanted to bring it up on the podcast because I think it's interesting how everyone had to adapt during COVID. All the clubs, all the organizations, how they held meetings, even how government operates, they had to change everything. And because one of the biggest things about getting elected to like a presidency or a chair of an organization is the convention.
Yeah.
You have the big convention, you have the breakout rooms, the meetings during the day, going over things, resolutions, bylaws, everyone's in person, the parties afterwards.
Right.
And then COVID happens and boom, everything's online.
None of that. Yeah.
It's so heartbreaking. But
It is, but it's a testament to how resilient organizations are.
Yeah.
I mean, people figured it out, and an organization like the Democratic Party of Hawaii or any other political party, it's the whole goal is like keep it going, right? And so people adapt and figure it out. The previous chair before me did a great job of like pivoting and getting an online vendor and getting everybody mostly to adapt to the rules and figure out some of the things in the bylaws like we clearly couldn't follow. So
Right.
What do? You just make an exception and say we'll deal with it later, because you have to.
Yeah. And there's always exceptions to rules, especially, and I think a lot of people understand, like, there has to be.
Right.
Like, the show has to go on. And that's, one thing about humans in general. We're really resilient. In the beginning, it takes us a minute, but then once we figure it out, it's, okay, we can move forward. So when you became chair, were there other candidates? I don't remember. I didn't go because I hate online meetings, so I didn't do the convention.
Yeah, there were two other candidates that ran, and again, stepping into this role or even offering yourself up to serve in this role during a very difficult time. I mean, that takes a lot of. I give them a lot of credit for stepping up into this role. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And then, of course, we had the convention, and I won and ended up in this role. And, we sat down and looked at the budget, and all of the fundraising events that we typically did were all in person, right? We had a giant breakfast. We had a giant happy hour party, and neither of those could be done in 2020. We're trying to do them at the end of 2021. We thought we could maybe do them in the spring or summer, but that clearly hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also came in August of 2020, and right around the corner after that was the 2020 elections. So how do you organize people and get them to volunteer all remotely, all online?
Yeah.
You can't go and, knock on people's doors and ask them to vote for, the Democratic slate of candidates. You just couldn't.
Yeah. And that was hard too, because I ran for office, but for me, running for office was when COVID hit and they locked everything down. I was like, I kind of lost motivation because for me, I love campaigning. I love the knocking on doors and things like that. And the fact that I wouldn't be able to go out and meet people and tell my story, I was just like, oh, this sucks. And then I guess depression too because of COVID and the lockdowns. But so that's interesting, because the fundraising is something that my other groups I'm president of my Lions Club now, and yeah, we didn't fundraise last year, and now we're looking at our budget like, oh,
Yeah.
And even still, so a lot of the things that we did were like selling coupons to like McDonald's. You know, we sell booklets and things like that. But yeah, how do you? And we're still trying to figure out how could we raise money. Well, because no one's meeting in person really.
Right.
So like, how do you?
So we had to be creative, and one of the things that I'm really proud of is we converted to doing events by mail. So you would order a snack box, and we'd have a Zoom
right.
to watch the presidential debates, and everyone would be sitting in the Zoom together, and you'd eat some snacks that we specifically selected for that event. We did the first presidential debate was in Cleveland, Ohio, so we got some snacks from Ohio.
Oh,
they have those delicious like chocolate Buckeyes, which are little peanut butter balls covered in chocolate, and we got some taffy and other things just to make it feel kind of fun for everyone. For the DNC convention, we got some cocktail kits, so it was all the mixers, and we would send it in these little like they're almost like test tubes or little bottles, right? And a little simple syrup and a little like dragon fruit syrup, and tell people like here's the ingredients and here's how you make your own little DNC celebratory cocktail. And it ended up being great, and it's not something we ever would have done before, right?
Yeah.
Before we just would have invited people to one
But
place.
was that fundraising though? Like they would.
It was.
pay to
You
do
buy
that?
the box for $25, and the things in the box plus the postage is, I don't know, 15.
Wow, that's a
or
really
whatever.
great idea though. I might actually bite that idea.
Totally.
I'll give you guys credit though. I'll say, hey, I learned this
Yeah.
I'll tell them, hey, go listen to about 25 minutes in
There
the
we go.
podcast. There you go. Because I think that is something that we could do even for the other groups I belong to. And what about your Portuguese chamber? Do they have to fundraise, or do they get a
So
set
we
amount?
yeah, we do. So we also did a wine tasting, but people had to pick up the wines from Tamura's, and we had a whole set menu, and people would buy their tickets and show that they got a ticket and redeem it. And you take the wine home, and actually it was kind of nice because you could go home and you could make all the little appetizers that you would want. We had a whole recommended list of things that would pair well, right? So the
That's
first
awesome.
one was would pair really well with a really sharp cheese or kind of salty.
I remember
snacks
that. I
or
remember that
whatever.
email.
And so you just got to get a little creative. And frankly, it kept our costs down, right? Because
Yeah.
in an ordinary situation, you'd have to rent out a whole event space or half a restaurant or whatever. And so we didn't have to do that. Now, of course, when we can go back to restaurants, we'd love to
Yeah.
do that because we got to support our restaurants. But for at that time, it made a lot of sense, and at least we could stay a little bit connected with everyone else.
Yeah, no, I like that. See, now I kind of regret not looking at the emails because literally, like, I hated Zoom meetings. Like, I just felt like again, because I'm more of a social
Yeah.
person, I want to be there in person. Now, I do think Zoom meetings are more efficient by far, but I just really like that social aspect. So
Yeah.
I just cut off. I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm just gonna go to work because I didn't telework. I worked in an office. So I'm still going to work every day. So I was lucky. I got to get out the house. A lot of people didn't get to get out. So I get why, those people were probably like on the Zoom and all that for the social events. But I just stuck to my PlayStation 5, bro. So PlayStation 4. And then I got a 5. So
Everyone needs an outlet.
yeah. But I just want everyone out there who's been trying to get a PlayStation 5 to just be jealous because he ain't getting one anytime soon, it seems. But
The bidding starts for James's PlayStation 5.
yeah. Wait, I don't know if I could do that over the podcast.
Okay, well,
yeah,
scratch that part.
But I do. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I think that's something that I can kind of copy for maybe like my Lions Club or other groups I belong to. So when you were entering into becoming chair and the lockdowns were there, did you have to adjust anything that you had planned to do besides maybe the fundraising?
Oh yeah. We of course have lots of events all the time as a party, as the dominant party in the state, and so we did have to adapt. But it's actually created, I think, a recipe that could be replicated even when it's not a pandemic. So every week we have these lunch and learn series. So we bring an expert in and they talk about a certain event. And if we were to do this in real life, it would probably have to be in an evening.
Yeah.
We'd probably have to get some food for people and make all
Yeah.
these arrangements. But since it's on Zoom, We can do it during lunchtime because everybody has to eat lunch at some point. And since it's at lunch, Hawaii time, we can get experts from the East Coast to tune in.
Yep. Yep.
And
Wow.
if we were to do this in person, we would be, our pool of people who would talk with us would be basically just people who could drive to our headquarters. So it'd be people who live in town. I mean, I don't even think we could have an expert from the North Shore drive in because that would be, an hour and a half in traffic. And that's, ridiculous to ask them to do.
Yeah.
But now they can just beam in from their house and be on Zoom, and we all get to learn from them.
And can even be at work, still
That's right.
listening.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of people either listen to music if they're teleworking or something.
Right.
So yeah,
and the format lends itself well to being recorded and uploaded onto Facebook, and people can play it afterwards if they weren't able to make it. Whereas if it's in person, you got to have a whole microphone set up and video, and it's a lot more of a hassle.
And then, so when it comes to like those little fundraising ideas, is that something that kind of spurred in your mind, or was that like a collective? I'm sure always a collective effort, but the organizing of it. I guess I always want to give a shout out to people like Aaron Fernandez,
Yeah,
executive director.
She's fantastic.
That's a rough gig, executive director
It
for
is.
any organization, and you know that because
She's
you used
my
to be
employee.
Yeah. But you used to be an
I used to be
executive
executive director of the Hawaii Construction Alliance.
Yeah, so you're the main cog in the machine, man.
Yeah.
Like, and if the board wants something, you got to get that done, but you got what staff and things
Right.
need. So
it's a big balancing act. So yeah, every executive director out there, shout out to them,
Yeah,
especially those that made it through the pandemic. Okay.
yeah, shout out to them.
But yeah, it's a team effort, just like everything else. And I think here in Hawaii, we do a good job of that, right? It's recognizing, the team's effort and supporting them and not being, overbearing, right? It's not a dictatorship.
Yeah.
But also spurring them to action, because what good is a committee if they don't do anything?
Yeah.
So just there's a little bit of push and pull,
If they're always arguing or attacking each other.
Right.
But I do say too, it was disappointing that we didn't get to have that what is the breakfast after the primary election?
Oh yeah, unity breakfast.
Yeah, the unity breakfast, and that's cool. So for anyone who may not know what that is, I'm not sure if other states might do it too.
They probably do.
But it's after the primary election, the Democrats in our state will have a breakfast.
Yeah, and win or lose,
win or
everybody
lose.
shows up. All the candidates do, and it's a nice tradition.
Yeah,
So we should actually, that's a good reminder, adding to this to-do list. Man, see, the more I talk with you, the more to-do list. So you got to start planning for 2022.
yeah, because you got to have that, and because I think that's super important, because a lot of people are very upset. They spend a lot of time and energy running for office, a lot of money, a lot of hopes are shattered. So man, that night can be devastating for some people, and then that next morning, a lot of people are just like, I don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
But if they know, they got to show their face at this unity breakfast. And then you go there, and really, most people are in high spirits. I always had a blast. I was always late because I was hungover. Because if I was running, I was, of course, partying.
Yeah.
Even though I lost, I was it's okay. I don't mind. Life moves on. But
Right.
it was still an experience is what I appreciate, too. And you ran for
I did, yeah,
city
ran for city
council.
council. And so I had the same experience, but you go and it's part of the process.
Yeah.
And it takes, I think, a certain level of maturity. But I think if you're running for office, you possess that already, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just something you have to do.
Yeah. Some people, though, I think some people, they run for office and they don't, of course you never want to think you're going to lose, right? But they really just, I don't know, they don't think about it at all. And then when that moment happens, they're just so devastated. They just give up. They want to give up on politics, on the community and everything. And it's it's all right, man.
That's right. There's so much you can do beyond running for office to make a change in your community. And there's so much, if you're willing to put yourself out there as a candidate or anything else, and you have these skills you want to share with the community, then continue to share them.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you can start a podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's what I did. I was well, and honestly, that's kind of why I started the podcast. Not because I lost, but it was I consider myself connected to the community leaders and our legislative leaders and things like that. So I have a wide variety of people that I know, business leaders and things.
Yeah.
And I just thought, people like yourself, have such interesting stories. And instead of us sitting down at, some local bar just talking between us, sharing interesting stories, have these people come on the podcast to share their story. And sometimes I think that's just a journey that has to be taken. Not to say that this will ever be super popular and that anyone will care about what I'm talking about, but you never know, and you just have to take those chances.
That's right.
And, when one door, I wouldn't even say it closes, but, it might shut halfway because something's going on in there. You just come back later, but you got other doors to check.
That's right. And this goes back to people being flexible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we were all flexible because of the pandemic. You sort of sit down and reassess and then figure it out. And it's the same thing. I mean, whether it's, again, running for office or any other thing, and you lose or there's a setback, take a breath, figure it out, pivot, and move forward, because you have to.
And it's even if it's like, I know people, like if you're studying for the bar, I know people that have, failed the bar like twice, 3 times. Yeah. If you really want it, you just got to keep going at it. And yeah, it's disappointing, and you should let yourself be disappointed, because that's an emotion that, you should have. Otherwise you'd be like a sociopath, but, you just got to pick yourself up and go. And then maybe, I had another podcast with another guy that I know. He was talking about the reason he joined one of the organizations that we belong to is because he had an epiphany one day, and he said he had picked up a book years ago. He's an avid reader, and he was questioning his own philosophical ideas, religious upbringing, things like that. And then one day he decided, okay, I'm actually going to read that book. Something in his head told him, read that book. And he said when he read that book, it just hit him. Like, okay, this is the path I'm going to pursue, because this is exactly what I've kind of been, it's the missing puzzle piece in my mind. And he kind of just, the path that he's been on has been a successful one for him. And that's, again, maybe the podcast for me was just, honestly, the podcast spurred from, I kept applying for jobs. And I just kept getting, denied. I would go through these interview processes, and they would be like, yeah, oh, we really like you, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Which I hate that. Just do the interview. Don't send me no fancy emails. Just say, hey, thanks for interviewing. We'll give you the results. But then, I would, oh, sorry, we went with the other candidate, or blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it's just frustrating. And then one, I've always had the podcast idea in the back of my mind, really since about 2013. A friend of mine had approached me about doing it, and then I was like, I would do it, but we just never jumped on it. And then just throughout the years, it's always been in my head. And then, man, that one email, I said, you know what? Fuck this. I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I have nothing to lose. I said, I know a lot of cool people. Maybe people will be interested in the stories too. And then, actually, you are my 10th guest.
Yeah.
So I
lucky
just
number
want to
10.
give you a round of applause, because I think, usually statistically, I think it's about 3 podcasts people last and then they quit because no one realizes the amount of work that it actually takes. It's not about just recording it and uploading it. There's so much extra work. So the fact that I made it to 10 and had you here, that's why for me 10 is a lucky number. Yeah.
All right.
So it's a mini milestone. Yeah. So, I appreciate you giving me your time. And,
well, I look forward to you getting to 100.
Yeah, soon. Yeah, hopefully. But we'll just kind of revert back to the Democratic Party and whatnot. I want to know, if you're willing to share it, how you feel about the Democratic Party's, I guess it would be the perception of the residents of Hawaii on how our Democratic legislators in the House, not maybe the party, because the party is full of a bunch of like really diehard go-getters, but it seems like
I think you've hit on an interesting point. So for the listeners out there who, if you're not from Hawaii, Hawaii is the bluest state in the country. We have 24 out of 25 seats in the state Senate, 47 out of 51 in the state House. All but one of our governors has been a Democrat. All but 2 of our Congress people in recent history have been Democrats. So it's a dominant political force, but because it's so dominant, all of the sort of factions that make up the big tent of the Democratic Party nationwide, all of those tensions are exacerbated. So there's people who are strong Democrats because they're strong environmentalists, or there's people who are strong in the labor movement and workers' rights, and there are people who are strong in other social causes, right? And they come to the table, and because, again, we're so dominant, I think everyone's voice becomes that much louder and that much more present. Whereas if you're in a state like Ohio or another sort of swing state, Nevada or somewhere else, I think they have to hold hands a lot tighter.
Yeah.
And here sometimes the gloves come off, and so that's where it's at. So that's the first part, and then the second part is the public's perception, and I think that because the party's so dominant, when a member of the public disagrees with a decision of one person, whether that's the governor or someone in the legislature or whatever, it becomes like, oh, they're mad at the party, this party, blah blah blah. I would like to say that if you go back to civics, if you go back to 11th grade or 8th grade or whenever you did civics, there's a whole process, right? And so it's easy to cast blame on this sort of nameless, faceless entity, the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that goes into it. And if you're mad about a decision that the governor made, then contact the governor.
Yeah.
And if you contact me about it, I will forward your email on. That's fine. That's my job. I'm happy to do that. But, I think that the way that our country's so polarized right now, it's really easy just to sort of, again, have this nameless, faceless thing that you blame. Mm-hmm. And it's true on our end too, right? People blame Trump for everything under the sun.
Yeah.
It's not always Trump. Sometimes it's Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
People blame, Mitch McConnell for this, that, or whatever. Sometimes it's, one member of the Senate that's holding things up. And, to some extent, as the leader, Mitch McConnell, I'm sure, could talk to whoever that person is and figure it out. But, there is a process. And I think there needs to be more of an appreciation of that, especially if we want to get away from being so polarized in this country.
Yeah. And see what kills me is, again, even when Bush was president, it was Bush's fault, and everything was Obama's fault, and everything is Trump's fault still. But in my opinion, like, people, they don't pay attention to what really impacts them is the local politics.
Right.
They just, whatever's going on locally, they're still blaming on, like, they want the president to be basically like a reigning monarch. Like, the president has limited powers on purpose. Mm-hmm. I don't want the president to have all these powers to just make these executive actions and things happen in all the states. That's not, Hawaii is not, Missouri. What if Biden's making decisions that would really not be pretty for Hawaii based on, Delaware? Like,
right.
I don't want the president to have those. I want people to pay attention to their local leaders, their local candidates, and things like that, because those are the ones that have been in office for decades. And maybe you're complaining because you got potholes in your street, or you're complaining because healthcare costs in your state are too high. But I mean, don't worry about the president.
Yeah.
You got to worry about the local guys.
And I think this goes back to something we talked about earlier, which was, people being adaptable. Mm. And I think we live in this outrage culture where, like, you hear about something that you don't like and you're offended and outraged about it.
Yeah.
But humans are adaptable, and you may not like this decision, but you're going to survive. Take a breath. You'll be okay.
Yeah.
For the most part, there are some things which are somewhat existential. But, for the most part, like, if the pothole in front of your house isn't filled tomorrow, you'll be fine. Complain, write a letter until it gets done. Mm-hmm. But it's not, you won't die.
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the process. Your pothole will be on a list of 1,000 potholes.
Right.
And, to be honest, though, in a lot of cases, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
It's true.
Which is kind of what I've found out. The more you harp on something and nag, then, might get done a little earlier. Right. But still, again, like you said, you have to respect the process.
And I think one other thing that I've come to realize is, all of these people, from President Biden on down, they are all people with limited attention spans, and they can only do so much all at once. And, even if there's a whole agency or a cadre of people, working on something, it's still a process. We again live in a society of immediate gratification, and most things aren't immediate.
Yeah, you gotta wait. You gotta be patient.
And to some extent, and I ran for city council, and I've seen roads that haven't been repaved for 40 years, and that's egregious, obviously. But speak up, complain, make sure that you're on the list of potholes to be filled.
But see,
complain and move yourself up.
and I'm glad you brought that up too. That part, because the other side too is people have to remember there's egos in politics, and if you are an elected official, and let's just say the mayor hates you, like you're just beefing. None of your roads getting paved,
Right.
No matter how much people complain. So yeah, there's so much that goes into politics, which is why I love it. I love there's everything from a sociological aspect to a psychological aspect, the individual person, the ego, things like this,
Right.
groupthink, all that. I love it, man.
I mean, we live in a society, and we all have to get along, and that involves people.
Yeah.
With all their flaws and all of that, and it requires a certain degree of understanding and finesse, and that's how it is. We're not robots. Thank goodness we're not robots.
I think because one of the reasons I asked this, because one of the things that people have always been talking about is like legalization of marijuana, which is always the hottest topic. But especially during COVID, the raising of the minimum wage was a huge thing. But it just seems never to work. It's weird to me. I mean, I get it. In my opinion, there should be multiple layers to it. Like, it shouldn't just be raising the minimum wage. There should be like tax incentives and breaks for small businesses. Not IBM, right? But because a lot of companies here, they do pay below national average, but we have one of the highest, if not the highest, cost of living. And you, as in one of your many hats, as chair of the Democratic Party, who supports raising the minimum wage, is it frustrating for you? Or actually, let me tap onto that one too, real quick. And working with the Portuguese chamber, which represents the businesses, which I think gives you a really good insight and helps you in your role as chair, because you're able to draft testimony and explain to people the impacts of different things. So when it comes to they just keep denying the raising of the minimum wage, how is that frustrating for you as a chair? Or?
Absolutely. And I wrote an op-ed in March, right in the middle of legislative session, which got a lot of attention. Some of it negative from the legislature. Some people were upset.
Oops.
But as chair of the Democratic Party, it should be no surprise that the chair of the Democratic Party is supporting one of the key issues and tenets of the party. And President Biden himself has called for a $15 minimum wage, which would be much higher than we have here in Hawaii. And he's taken steps on the federal level to do that. But one thing we've also seen in the pandemic is it's very difficult for businesses to get their employees back. And I think part of that is just the wage incentive's not there. And wages have been stagnant for too long. And so we as a community, and this isn't just a question of raising the minimum wage because everything else is interconnected. The cost of housing, the cost of just living here, everything has to be shipped in, and there is a price to paradise. How do we deal with all of those things and make sure, and at the end of the day, raising the minimum wage is just one part of making sure that people can survive here, and that we're treating, those who are hourly wage earners, that we're treating them with dignity and valuing their work. Coming from a labor background, I believe very firmly that there is dignity in all work, whatever you do.
For sure.
It should be respected, and it has to be recognized. And so it's very clear to me that this is something they should have done. They didn't do it. But, we will continue to try again. I think on the other hand, there's, there are a lot of people who are really great advocates and activists and very excited about this issue. And, they didn't get the ball over the finish line. The sports analogy might be a good one. If one tactic doesn't work, maybe it's time to think of another one. And, use the off season to train and all of that. But if you're just going to run the same play over and over and over
yeah.
again, why are we surprised when the same thing happens?
Well, it's interesting now because of the pandemic and everything, and you could say, yeah, because people were getting the extra money on unemployment, the workers have thrown the audible and they've said, well, guess what? Not going to work. Not going, or not going. It's not that I'm not going to work, but it's like, why would I work for you when, if I want a day off, I got to ask you 3 months in advance. Like,
Yep.
you treat me like shit. If I'm 2 minutes late, you're complaining. Like, it just,
And the 40-hour work week, 8 hours a day, 5
Yeah,
days
that's so
a week,
stupid.
doesn't work for everyone. It didn't before, and we just didn't realize it.
yeah.
I mean, we have going back to Erin, who was our executive director at the party. She has 2 kids at home, and it was a lot easier for her to just work from home
Yeah.
and get the kids ready and get them situated on their iPads for virtual school. Then, if it weren't a pandemic, she'd be running around, drop them off, get to the office. Like, that's crazy,
Well, I'm disappointed in the fact that a lot of the departments here in Hawaii are talking about bringing teleworkers in. They want like 3 or 4 days a week. But for me, I'm just like, why? Okay,
Right.
1 day a week, I kind of get it. Post-pandemic. Doesn't make sense to bring them in like they've already started during a pandemic, which is still ongoing. But, yeah, like you're saying, like especially single parents or just households where both parents are working and they have kids that go to school or to sports. Like, it's so much easier and convenient to telework. And you know what, personally, hey, if you're at home and your work day is 8 hours, whatever, you get your lunch, and you're doing something and you take 5-10 minutes to go do something else in your
Right.
house or whatever, it's okay. Because that 10 minutes that you're getting your kid ready for something or doing something that other people will say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be working. Bro, if you were at the office, you'd be on your phone.
Right.
You'd be in the bathroom. You'd be in the lounge, smoke breaks.
Right.
So I think the policy needs to just change, like you were saying. The work week should be shortened because we have enough workers. But that's a whole other thing. I wanted to say that on top of the people not going to work, one of the arguments for raising a minimum wage was that all the costs of everything will go up. But guess what? Guess what happens when no one's working in the factories, the fishing boats? They're not manufacturing anything. The prices go up because we don't have as much. Even right now, people who are trying to get appliances, the appliances are on like a 6-month
Yep.
backlog, and it's not even guaranteed that they'll have the supply in 6 months.
We just ordered a stove for my grandma, and we've had the delivery day like pushed back, I think
Wow.
3 or 4 times, and it's amazing. I mean, it's a stove. It's pretty easy to. There should be thousands of stoves,
And the cost of them
somewhere in
have
this
gone up.
country. Yeah,
Because again, no one's really making them. There's no workers in the factories. So these are in a sense, if we take the pandemic out of it and we just say people are protesting not working, it's an unnecessary, like, just pay the people. I still get with the pandemic and all that. I do just want to say, did your grandma live here in Hawaii?
here.
Have you been to like Lowe's and Home Depot and looked at like their slightly damaged or returned items?
We have.
Bro, there's a lot. I was just
Yeah.
over there yesterday, and they had like washers and dryers brand new because the order was canceled by the person. Like, one of them was like originally like $990. It was discounted down to like $324.
Wow.
So anyone listening,
That's right.
you might want to
There
go
you
check
go.
out your Lowe's and ask for the clearance items, or there's another like damaged,
Right.
but they're not like damaged like
Right.
like they
They
won't
just
work.
scraped or something.
Yeah.
And it's cosmetic. Yeah, and this, I think, again, goes back to people being adaptable. And
Yeah.
like, it's people learn and figure out how to economize and
Yeah.
how to be a savvy, smart shopper. And I think also the pandemic showed that, and we're kind of seeing that a little bit now. The price of ahi. I went to Tamashiro's the other
Yep.
day, tried to get some poke. It's insanely expensive, but right when the pandemic began, they couldn't sell all the ahi they were bringing in,
Mm-hmm.
and so we live in like this like strange economy, and we're all participants in it, but hopefully things get back to normal. can match supply and demand a little bit better, but there's some things that are way out of whack. I mean, housing here is definitely an example of supply and demand
and
not being in sync.
That's something that else I don't think you mentioned in your intro about yourself. Now, when we had talked before over in Kaka'ako, you had mentioned something that you were working with a.
Yeah, so
Can
we're
we talk
working.
about that?
Sure, yeah. It's still a little tentative. We're hoping to launch in the next few months, but a nonprofit that would be focused on housing, not just housing advocacy, but being really a resource center, because we don't have the same ecosystem of housing nonprofits that a lot of other cities in the rest of the United States have. There is not a tenants' rights organization. There's not. If you have a problem with your landlord, what are you going to do?
But what is that? Hawaii tenants. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I think I've seen some
I think they're
flyers
just
out there, but at the end of the day, if you have an issue, what are you going to do?
Oh yeah, there's like no.
You might call a legal clinic type place, and they might give you a brochure, give you a little bit of advice, and say, good luck. And that's obviously a travesty. Part of our housing market, in addition to supply and demand being imbalanced, is people are moving around. They get evicted. They get they can't afford the rent. They move somewhere else, or they have an issue with the landlord, or here in Hawaii, we have a lot of people who live in kind of multi-generational family things. They're one fight away, a fight with their father-in-law or whatever, from being kicked out.
And that,
right?
that happens.
And that happens far too often, and there's really no resource for a lot of these people. And so, we've been working with a lot of different organizations to put that together. We're trying to get some grant money and get it off the ground, because it's really something that's absolutely needed here in the community. So maybe in a few months after this is set up, we can come back and talk.
Yeah,
housing.
I would like that.
Yeah.
And what is so you guys gonna try to provide like legal services?
Yep.
Or?
So we're hoping to take the model of some of the other organizations in the community that do direct legal services for members, and then also do sort of a think tank analysis of housing. People left, right, and center come up with ideas for housing and how we make more affordable housing or make existing housing more affordable, whatever, any number of things. There is not an organization that takes a dispassionate look and says, hey, if you implement this policy, what's going to happen? And so to that extent, we've been developing housing policy in sort of flying blind, so to speak. And trying to see if this works, and it doesn't work, and you're reticent to change it afterwards. But if it's not working, what good is it?
Yeah, and it's a shame, like, because some people say, oh, well, if you can't, afford housing, get an apartment, or, move in, live with your family forever. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
It shouldn't be that way. I mean, I think it's just weird. Like, I don't know, Hawaii is such finite land. There's only so much space we can use. And the state and the military owns a lot of it, but I won't get into that.
Yeah. But even subtracting that out, we still have a huge housing issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all these causative factors, even if you take away, one or the other, there is no doubt that we are in a crisis, and a lot of it is of our own making. And we're going to have to get ourselves out of it. There's no magic wand. It's not 10,000 houses aren't going to materialize from thin air overnight and solve our problem.
And what's crazy is we won't even talk, unless you want to, about the moratorium that's not extended for the housing.
Right.
But even before that, Hawaii was having a housing crisis. Like, even with just a homeless population, we can't build that many houses a year to even keep up with the homeless population,
Right.
let alone the actual housing that we need for people.
Yep.
So you don't have to have 3 generations, 4 generations living in a 2-bedroom condo. If you could, and I'm springing this on you, my bad, but if you could implement one initial policy or idea that they said, okay, we'll do one thing right now, what do you think?
So at the legislature in 2017, I worked on passing a bill, it became law, that created a tax waiver for the construction of a certain class of affordable rental housing. And it was a great program that set up, and we got the state to waive the general excise tax for construction and renovation of affordable rentals. We got the construction unions, people building it, to take a wage reduction to lower the cost of labor in exchange for having a certain number of units. So these construction workers could be building the homes that they live in.
Which I think is so
That's
smart.
part of the deal. We approached the banks, the local banks, and they agreed to give best pricing as well as the contractors best pricing and execution. So we put together this basket of incentives to help the creation of affordable rentals. And the first project submitted their application, and it was found that there was an issue. There was a legal issue in implementing it. And so we went back to the legislature to say, hey, can we fix this? Can we expand the program? And unfortunately, it's been, that fix has been stuck at the legislature. It hasn't passed. If it were, we would be able to create, middle-class workforce rental projects. And there are a number of developers who are ready to go to build these things, and they're being held up because the legislature hasn't taken action on it. And so I'm hoping that next session they do, because this is one of the cheapest, quote unquote, ways for the state to incentivize housing production. The state could build thousands of public housing units, and they have. I mean, if you look at Mayor Wright, which is on the other side of Chinatown from where we're sitting right now, they wanted to spend $2 billion on Mayor Wright. And that's fine. That's fine. That's great.
The
There's
new
a
one?
huge need for to renovate.
Whatever
the whole
happened
thing.
to that?
And we can talk about all of that on a future podcast.
Yeah, okay. That's a deep one.
But there's other much cheaper ways for the state to make a dent in housing, and that's one of them. The other thing that I really think that the state needs to do is look at student housing at UH. Dollar for dollar, unit for unit, this is one of the cheapest ways that we can create housing that's dedicated to a specific type of person. It's not going to be sold to a millionaire from California. They're not going to swoop in and buy a dorm room.
Yeah.
But we can get our UH students out of apartments in Waikiki or wherever they might be living, Macaulay, and get them onto campus. UH has a proposal right now. They just did the EIS for it, and it's about $200,000 a unit. I mean, that is a price point that it makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's cheaper than building it on the private market. There are a lot of other housing interventions, though, that end up being more expensive than if the private market were to do it themselves. And so we have to ask ourselves, is this a really good investment in the community if it's going to be more expensive than to have the government be involved?
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of thing that, going back to the housing nonprofit, the think tank aspect would look at. There was a proposal to build, modular factory-built housing out in kind of by Waipahu. It ended up being unit for unit like $700-something thousand.
Yeah.
At that point, the state should just buy. The state should just send someone to an open house and just buy a bunch of houses, right? And of course that's facetious, but it says something about how we spend our housing money. And we need to do a much better job of making sure that it actually produces housing that people can afford.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because a lot of the residents here, they'll say, it's the foreign investors. They're buying up all the expensive properties and, the mainlanders who are retiring and moving here. But I'd be curious to know, maybe from what I understand, the foreign investors is not even...
It's a small slice, but, to your point, we don't know. We don't know all of these things. We have a gut feeling, and a lot of policy gets driven around these gut feelings that people have. But we don't actually know to what extent they're foreign buyers or mainland people retiring here and thus driving up the, all of these things. And, we should have somebody that studies this, and that's part of what the think tank would do.
Because I was on a committee that was organized right before COVID hit, and we met. It was a bunch of I think it was Bank of Hawaii. What is it? Is it EAH?
Oh yeah, EAH. And they do great work.
I think IBEW had representatives there. I was there. Bunch of other people, and it was kind of let's all sit down and let's just have a real what is it
right?
Different stakeholders basically. And one of the things that I had always heard was one of the biggest costs was the utility work, because when they build a new tower, they have to upgrade everything around it. And so my suggestion was, well, what would be the cost savings if the state said, okay, we'll take care of the infrastructure, we just need you guys to build the units. But then on top of that, what are the constitutional arguments against saying like you have to have residency before you purchase a house or a property in Hawaii? Do you know anything about that?
I do a little bit. But I'm going to defer to this Future Housing nonprofit to study a lot of these questions. But you're right. I mean, there are all of these things that there are all of these factors that go into the equation, and it's not as simple as waving a magic wand and making these costs go away or passing the cost to somebody else. Because at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to pay for it, and it's a question of who does that, right?
And that kind of goes back to like what I was saying earlier, is like a lot of the arguments that are used, they're great on the mainland where you have so much space, but we don't have so much space. And from what I understand, there's a certain percentage of the land that you just cannot build on because it has to be permeable, right? Mm-hmm. So that limits as well where and how much we can build on that. So yeah,
this would be a good topic for a future podcast.
Yeah, I like
urban
that.
planning in Honolulu, because there's certainly a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually gonna have a guy on and talk about that too.
Oh, great.
But what are you gonna do in the future? What do you got coming up in the next, I guess, year or 6 months? Because you got the chamber.
Well, we've talked about some of these things. So with the chamber and the consular role, getting our sister state relationship with Madeira going, I think that's really exciting. With the party, my term ends in May. And so
soon.
Between now and May, we have a convention to plan. The party's been through a lot in the past year, not just COVID, but we've done 4 replacements for vacancies in the legislature. I think it's 4.
Yeah.
And we've done a whole lot of new programming for people. We've expanded membership. I mean, all this. So we're going to continue doing that. We have a bunch of big events coming up in the future there. What other things? I'm on the neighborhood commission. That's pretty quiet. That's been quiet so far.
Oh yeah,
more or less.
You used to be the chair.
I used to be the chair.
And now what are you?
So I'm just a member. I pass that along because one of the things that I really think is important is passing the baton. Right, you can't be a leader at any one thing forever.
Yeah.
And so after I think 2 or 3 terms or whatever as chair. Passed along to the vice chair, and I think that's good. That's healthy, right?
Who's the chair
Brian
now?
Cho.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's Brian, and then
so let's see all the other things that I do in the community. There's so many things.
Too much.
But I guess this might be a good time to announce. So in 2022, I'm running for city council. You heard it here first. James.
There it is. Boom.
There it is.
Tyler Dos Santos-Tam. Which district?
For, I guess, this town district, we're going through the redistricting process right now.
That's
which
right.
It's a little bit of a challenge. But, wherever the boundaries lie, we share all of the same issues here in this island.
Yep.
Whether you live here in Kaka'ako, where we're sitting right now, or in, my parents' neighborhood in Liliha and Alewa Heights, or in Kalihi or Moanalua or wherever else. I mean, a lot of the same issues are on people's minds. Mm-hmm. The cost of housing, the cost of living here. What is the city doing to improve that? Crime in our neighborhoods. We see the headlines every day. And you live in Chinatown. I mean, you definitely see that every day. I went to dinner on Saturday, and in the parking lot in Chinatown, there were like 20 cops.
Yeah.
They managed to chase some guy down, and he's lying down in the parking lot, and that's wild.
People would be surprised with what's going on in Honolulu in general.
Right. We have Hawaii 5-0 for a reason, but in Hawaii 5-0, they always solve the crime in 45 minutes, and then it's done. I guess in real life, we don't have that reality. We don't have that luxury. But yeah, so, all of these issues, we need, leadership, practical leadership, people who have actually gotten things done. And people will bring a new perspective to that office, and that's what I'm hoping to do. So you've heard it here first.
That's right. I appreciate you saying that.
And so there's that. There's just so many things, and I really enjoy being kind of a connector in the community and being involved in lots of different things. It's always exciting. There's something new, and like you, I would say I'm an extrovert, so it's been nice over the past few months as things have been reopening to get back to events and in-person, meetups. And maybe with the variant, we got to be a little bit more careful for the time being. But hopefully, once we get everyone vaccinated and get to a situation where we can be a lot more open and not have these safety measures in place, then I think it'll be really exciting. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So oh, and don't forget about your sardines, by the way.
Oh, that's right.
But if people wanted to reach out to you in your capacity as you,
Yeah.
if you have an Instagram or a Facebook, or if you want to give any contact information for the Democratic Party out.
Sure. My email for the Democratic Party is Tyler, Tyler, at HawaiiDemocrats.org. My personal email is tylerDST@gmail.com. I'm not afraid to give that out because I feel like it's everywhere anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Careful.
and I'm, I pride myself on being pretty good at replying to emails and, being responsive because, as a community member and as a leader in a number of ways in the community, that's what people would expect. And again, being an extrovert, I like talking to people.
Yeah.
So,
and then what about the Portuguese Chamber? Is it a Facebook page or a website?
Yeah, we got both. I think it's PortugueseChamberHawaii.org or on Facebook. And then we will be setting up our sister state website soon, so that'll be something like Hawaii-Madeira.com
That'll be cool.
or something. We'll figure that part out.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on here, and hopefully, we can get back in a few months and chat again. Hopefully, we'll have our housing nonprofit set up. I mean, there's so many things. So
yeah, that'll be a good one,
and it'll be really neat. And so I'm number 10 on the podcast.
Yeah, you're number 10.
We'll come back later on. Maybe I'll be number 100.
I hope you don't take that long.
No,
but
okay.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate your time, and I'm fascinated with all the things that you kind of like described to me that I didn't know you were even doing.
Yeah.
Especially the over
Sometimes
in
I don't
Portugal,
even know that I'm doing this.
Well, you got to get more active on promoting yourself on
Yeah.
Facebook for sure. But I appreciate your time, man. Thank you. And then we'll do it again. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.